Hey, everybody, it's David. I'm your host of Highway to Health podcast series, and I'm glad you're here. Thanks for following the show, tuning in, and I hope the conversations that we're having are educational, they're engaging, and I hope you find some inspiration. You know, this podcast was meant to celebrate the innovators, the disruptors, those in healthcare that are doing whatever they can to improve the experience, the access, and of course, the outcomes in care for our patient population. A big part of that journey, a big part of this open road journey that we're all on together is the provider and the provider experience and how we are enabling, empowering those providers to deliver, to render the type of care they got in the industry to be a part of. And that's why I'm excited to have the guest on today. Her name's Amanda Hanson. She's the president of Advanced MD. And we're going to get into all of those things. But first, I want to welcome Amanda. Welcome to Highway to Health.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here today, David.
I'm really glad you're here. I've gotten to know your team over the last few years, and I've been in your space for quite a while. And so I feel like I know you already. I feel like I know the organization already. And so I'm excited to learn more. Today, I know our listeners are too. This has become kind of a tradition of Highway to Health. Before we get into the business side of things, I like to ask, especially our executives, to share a healthy habit, mental habit, physical habit that you've implemented in your daily routine to stay at the top of your game. So if you don't mind sharing, what are some of the things that you do daily to maintain that mental and physical health and well-being?
All right. Well, I'm going to give you not one, but two things. So, and one of them's not daily, but one of them is still, it's really helped my physical and mental health. So I'll start with that one. A few years ago, I read the book, Measure What Matters by John Doerr, and I loved the idea of objectives and key results. And so we decided to adopt them here at Advanced MD. But I took it one step further and I said, hey, why shouldn't I have OKRs in my personal life? And so I sat down, instead of setting New Year's resolutions or New Year's goals, I set OKRs every year. And one of my objectives is to see and appreciate more of God's beautiful earth, right? I love the world. I love nature. And so under that objective, I have specific KRs. And one of those KRs is how many miles I'm going to hike every single year. So Advanced MD, we're located in Utah. I'm in Utah. And I love to hike. And so I will pick out a trail, one or two trails every week, and I will scale the mountains. And I keep track of my elevation gain, of the miles, of my heart rate, of the time. And so physical health is important to me. And I'll track myself. I'll do the same hike. There's one called Pfeifferhorn in Salt Lake. I'll do the same hike every single year. And then I will track to see if I've done better or worse compared to prior years. So that's one thing. My daily habit, though, is really trying to consume some sort of book every single day. And typically I don't, I'm a mom, I have 3 kids, I'm running an organization. It's really hard to carve out the time to do that. But I fell in love with Audible. And so I will, sometimes it's business books, sometimes it's, just historical nonfiction or self-help, but I will always be listening to a book.
I love both of those things. I've got quite the drive into our office every morning, and on my way home, that's where I get my reading in as well, is on that drive. Yeah. And so I can relate. The other thing I want to mention is this OKR concept. One of my mentors, Stephen Huddleston, he's at Ventra Health now, but he and I worked together when I was at Med Assets, InThrive, now FinThrive. And he implemented that structure for our teams at that organization. And I love you can't manage what you can't measure. And
that's right.
Objectives and key results give you very tangible ways to measure improvement and progress. I like how I've always just implemented it professionally. I like how you've done it personally as well. So that's very exciting. Utah's a beautiful place to be hiking also. So you got a good setup.
It definitely is. There's so many great trails, so much to see. So I don't know. And it's great because now when I'm driving to the trail, I can listen to my book, right? So it's really, really good. Right now I'm listening to Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb. I don't know if you've heard of that one. It's pretty good.
Okay.
It's great. She's a mental health therapist, so it's kind of relatable as well. And she gives kind of both sides, one side of being in therapy and the other side of some of the stories and the things that she's experienced in terms of, helping other people. It's interesting.
Yeah, I'll make note of that. That's good. And we talk a lot about mental health on this podcast, and for good reason. And so maybe I encourage everybody to take a look at that book. I appreciate you sharing those things. Sometimes it can be personal, but I love it. I love hearing, what you find time to do and how you help. With 3 kids and running an organization, I have 4 kids and myself, my wife and I, and that takes up a lot of time. And so you have to carve out intentionally areas of your day where you can take care of yourself so you're the best for them. You're at your best for your family and your colleagues.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more.
Well, let's get into business a little bit. You ready?
I think I'm ready for it.
All right, let's do it. I mentioned in the introduction, this podcast really is meant to celebrate those that are improving access, experience, outcomes for the patient. But even with all the innovation, the integration, all the streamlining that's happening, the automation that's happening in healthcare, true transformation doesn't happen without the provider, without the caregiver. And so I want to spend some time on this topic. With everything that we've seen, we're probably living in the golden age of innovation in healthcare. We've seen more happen in the last 10 years than maybe any other generation. How have you seen this experience or this innovation impact the provider experience? What ways are we empowering these providers to do the job that they got into the industry to actually do?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, it's easy to relate to the healthcare experience as a patient, right? Because every person at one point in time has been a patient. And as I've said, I've got 3 kids. I've been to the pediatrician's office more times than I can count. I've birthed 3 children, so I've been to the obstetrician's office more times than I can count. But I think the job of a provider is a really unique one. And at Advanced MD, one of our goals is really to empower those physicians and those providers with tools and technology so that they can really focus on patient care and the patient experience. It's to remove some of the administrative burden. And at Advanced MD, we like to think of ourselves as the heartbeat of healthcare, which means that we are really connecting providers with their patients and allowing them to provide that care. And it's been incredible. I started at the company 17 and a half years ago. I'm not gonna discount myself of that half year of credit, but I started back in 2006, and the transformations I've seen in healthcare IT over that time have been incredible. And I agree with your sentiment as well. Over the last 10 years, we've seen even more. But some of the things I think that have really improved and, helped providers become more inspired to really focus on patient care. The first thing I would say, and this is definitely recent, post-COVID especially, is the adoption of telemedicine and remote health monitoring, right? So allowing visits to take place regardless of where the patient sits and where the physician sits or the provider sits. Also, second to that, I would say there's been a great enhancement in streamlined workflows, really trying to streamline some of those administrative tasks and allowing those providers to focus on patient care. Third, I think we've seen an enhancement in our data accessibility. And so, and that kind of goes right along with interoperability and data sharing as well. Yep. And just making sure that the data you're able to access it, that, it can be exchanged seamlessly between different organizations. And then the fourth thing I would mention is patient engagement tools. And so allowing the patient to play a more proactive role in their own healthcare experience, I think has made a tremendous difference, giving them the ability to see schedules, to schedule those appointments, to communicate with their providers, to get the information that they need to rate those providers, I think has made a big difference. And it's really allowed ultimately the providers to focus less on administrative and more on providing quality patient care.
You mentioned interoperability. I've got a question for you in that area. That's probably been the biggest challenge in my experience driving innovation in healthcare and driving the experience both on the patient and the provider side that we are working towards. There's some great tools out there. You mentioned telemedicine and remote patient monitoring. While that's a great offering, now you're adding complexity to the technology stack. And we need to bring in that data to be able to see it easily, make good decisions based on that data, and provide the right level of care at the right time for the right person. In your opinion, and if I'm putting you on the spot, let me know. In your opinion, is the interoperability challenge around the risk of integrating and making these systems more interoperable, the risk of, the data being insecure, or is it truly, is it the risk, or is it truly the technology and the ability to play nice together? Is that the bigger challenge for interoperability? Is it perceived risk, or is it technological?
Yeah, and I know you're not going to love this answer, but I really do think it's both, right? I do think that the security and the effort that goes into making sure that there's not data breaches or the data slippage or any of that is incredibly important. But I think the bigger factor is really different data structures that are built in different systems and how difficult it is to integrate and connect those. And at times, some of these potentially healthcare IT companies or healthcare organizations aren't incentivized even to play together. So regardless of the technical challenges, I think that sometimes that there's a disincentive to actually make sure that it's integrated. It's like, hey, that might take wallet share, that might take revenue out of my business. If I'm able to connect with them, they would, people might use a different solution instead of having a wholly integrated solution. And so I think it's really both, but I think the technical side is a real issue. It's really challenging. And certainly I agree with you. Strides have been made, but this is one of the biggest challenges in healthcare IT. I'd
like your opinion on this, but from my experience, the interoperability challenge is really around the format of the data and the cleanliness of the data. You can oftentimes get it, but making sense of it is the harder part.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that's where things, like some of the government mandates and the things that have come into play, like the Cures Act, as well as fire standards and HL7 standards, I think those things will help in the long run, right? As more companies adopt those basic standards, it'll make it easier to make some of those connections going forward. I got to tell you, this is a little off topic, but kind of on topic. This interoperability challenge is incredibly personal and important to me. And I would say that, I grew up with a father who had type 1 diabetes, right? My dad, he passed away, it's been 6 years now. I had to look at the calendar to see. He passed away 6 years ago from health complications, pain, his kidney failure. He had 2 kidney transplants. He had 2 pancreas transplants. It was a miracle he lived till he did. He was 60 when he passed. And I remember my dad got diabetes when he was like 20 months old. So he was very young.
Wow.
And at the time, the doctors had told his parents he likely wouldn't live past his 20s. And so I'm obviously incredibly grateful for the care that he received and them being able to prolong his life as much as they were able to. But I remember my mom going to doctor's appointments with him, literally with binders of his health history, his medications to make sure that there weren't any negative interactions. In addition to diabetes, he had like a triple bypass open heart surgery. He had to have other surgeries. He was legally blind by the time he passed. So a lot of those were effects of the diabetes.
Right.
But I think seeing that and watching that frustration and watching my mom have to dedicate herself essentially wholly to being his care provider when she had no medical experience, no experience in healthcare, just spoke to me on why it's so important that we have this continuity of care and that we can, that these different systems and these doctors can communicate with each other more easily, to really focus on that holistic patient experience. It's not just when you go to the eye doctor that's important. It's how does that impact all of the rest of your health? And so I think for me, it's a very personal thing. I think we have a long ways to go. We've definitely made strides, but it's something that, I'm personally very passionate about.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And, what's interesting to me is people like yourself that have made, the purpose of their career to improve this industry oftentimes have a personal story like that. And we talk, I've asked a lot of my guests, well, why did you get into healthcare? What I've learned over the last 2 years is sometimes the better question is, why have you stayed in healthcare? Because it's not easy, and there's challenges that are evolving every day, all the time, new ones popping up as well. It's stories like that, I'm sure, that keep you and others dedicated to this industry and in this journey that we're on together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely think about my dad, right? I think about his experience, and I think that people, while his experience was okay, people should have a better experience than my mom carrying the binder. And so that's kind of what I visualize. And any iterative improvement, I think, is a good improvement, right? Rome wasn't built in a day. It's not going to be fixed overnight. It's going to take time. It has taken time. It's going to take some help in some cases by the government passing legislation and requiring and mandating things. But at the same time, I think I really believe in Kaizen, right? The idea of iterative, continuous improvement, and that we'll get there. And I think there's the right people are involved to make sure that we get there.
Well, I think your experience gives you a good benchmark of where we were not too long ago, relatively speaking, to where we are today. And it's companies like Advanced MD and, the innovations that we're discussing today that have improved the experience, not only for the patient, but also for the whole family, like your mom, and taken some of that burden off of the family and made it easier for the holistic care team to understand, where that patient is in their journey and all the types of care that they're receiving at that time, so that they can work together and they can coordinate.
Absolutely. You're spot on with that.
I want to dig in a little bit more about the provider. We've talked about how innovation is helping empower them and deliver the kind of care that they're wanting to, that they're desiring to. And that has an impact on the patient, obviously, directly. One of the ways that these providers are challenged is the dynamic that they have with the payer, the insurance companies. And whether that's a governmental or a commercial payer, it has felt historically like that was unbalanced. How have you seen providers start to gain some leverage in that historically unbalanced relationship with the payer?
I think first of all, you're spot on that, insurance payers are incentivized to try not to pay, right? It's not dissimilar in automobile insurance, in personal liability insurance, as it would be in health insurance. Right? I think it's trying to find reasons to not pay has been a priority rather than focusing on holistic care and patient outcomes. And so there have been some improvements. The first thing I would say is that data is king. Using data and using a data-driven approach to build a case with the insurance payers when you're negotiating has proven incredibly effective for some of the providers that use Advanced MD. You can use those data analytics to demonstrate the value and the effectiveness of the services that you're offering to patients. And I think by presenting that data specifically on the patient outcomes, any cost savings, any quality metrics, that the healthcare organizations really showcasing their performance, they can negotiate higher rates that way. And so I think data is king. So making sure that you're using technology that allows you to have access to those metrics, to that information, so that you can compile it and build a good story. The second thing is really, embracing value-based care models, right? In a value-based care model, it's really more about the patient outcomes. It's really focused on improving that patient experience and those outcomes. And so I think by demonstrating your ability to do that and showing that you can do it in a cost-effective way, that will also allow you to negotiate better rates. And, I think the last thing is really just patient-centered care initiatives. So this kind of goes along with the other two. But in this, emphasizing your patient satisfaction, your patient engagement, and the patient experience can also be a crucial factor when trying to negotiate better rates. Of course, there's things like different advocacy groups and, organizations that you can join, and, numbers can be powerful as well. But I think those three things, having a data-driven approach, embracing value-based care, and then also focusing on patient-centered initiatives, those three things better position physicians and providers to negotiate rates that are fair. Right? At the end of the day, it's not about making a ton of money. It's about having something that is equitable to both sides, that's fair, and ultimately making the world a healthier place.
I love that answer, by the way. And I want to get in a little bit more on the data side of things. These payers, I think they have the advantage in the data game because they look at things on a scale much greater than the provider oftentimes looks at their own data compared to the data from patient populations and communities outside of their sphere of influence. So in a way, sometimes the provider has a narrow view on that data compared to what the health insurance or the payer has holistically. Have you seen any progress or any trends on the provider side of opening the veil a little bit, sharing data with providers around them, getting past this competitive advantage perception, and coming together and saying, let's share our data in some way, some form or fashion that'll allow us to balance this game that we're in against the payers so that we can understand on a wider scale what might be coming and what trends might be impacting us when we're negotiating those rates.
So I wish I could say that I've seen a lot of progress there. I really haven't seen a lot. About 8 or 9 years ago at AdvancedMD, we launched a benchmarking solution, and that was part of the idea, right? We're going to de-identify all the data. You're going to be able to benchmark yourself against a peer set of common people. Because, you're right. The payers have even more information. At AdvancedMD, we have about 60,000 physicians and providers that use our software. So our idea was, hey, if you're a single doc shop, right, you're one provider you're running your own business. Now you can have the information of, 60,000, right? Or maybe in your subset, it's 5,000, but that gives you more power. I would say our benchmarking product was too early, right? People weren't super excited about it. I think now, though, with artificial intelligence, with machine learning, with the acceleration of that, I think we're going to see that coming where, maybe it's something you subscribe to, maybe it's, a company or someone like an AdvancedMD, someone in healthcare IT that develops something that gives those people that access. And I think, the information, the ability to do it is there. It's just taking the initiative and then helping physicians and providers who really want to focus on patient care and don't necessarily want to focus on running a business, adopt that more business mindset of, hey, I need to do these things, or I need to hire someone, or I need to outsource these things so that I can put myself in the best position to be successful.
I had a gentleman on the podcast recently who talked about encouraging the provider to work on their business as much as they work in their business. And that's a little bit of a culture shift, especially for some, where as much as you work in the business, the day-to-day, the blocking and tackling, the taking care of patients, all of those things that you have to do, they're a must. And they're very urgent sometimes. Finding a way to take a step back and looking at your business on a broader scale, at a wider level, so that you can work on the general business. And that's what I hear you speaking to as well.
Yeah. And I think that, we've seen trends, especially in certain specialties, where some of those physicians in particular, they don't really want to work on the business, right? They really just want to focus on patient care. And I think it's part of the reason we've seen so much roll-up activity in the private equity space, whether it's in dermatology or ophthalmology and in some of those specialty-oriented organizations, because they understand the importance of that business aspect. But at the same time, they don't want to, or they're maybe not the right person or not equipped to be that. And so they're looking outwards. But I do think with the right tools, with the right equipment, with the right platform, you can do it yourself. And I love that idea of spending as much time working on the business as you work in the business. I'm going to steal it. It's a great idea.
I'll have to give I'll have to give that. His name is Jeff Tanner. I'll have to give him credit.
Perfect. Jeff, I'll give Jeff Tanner all the credit. Don't worry. When I use it, all credit goes to Jeff Tanner. Thank you, Jeff.
All right. I appreciate that. He will too. The second thing that you mentioned, which, man, this has been a topic since I got into healthcare 12 years ago, value-based care. It's something that we have touched on, previewed a lot in 12 years, but I've never seen the focus on value-based care that I've seen in the last year and a half. I was just at HLTH out in Vegas. Almost every presentation or panel that I was a part of and listened to had an element of value-based care conversation to it. We know where the risks present themselves with the provider and why it's hard to get more and more patients onto a value-based care model or plan. Where have you seen, if you don't mind sharing, where have you seen some success or maybe some adoption on value-based care in what you do every day and how Advanced MD is working with providers? Where have you seen that uptick lately?
Yeah, I think where we've seen it primarily is integrating behavioral health with primary care. And so it's really interesting. We have a couple integrated health groups that really focus on value-based care, and they've been able to adopt pretty successful models this way. And the way that they've done it, part of the reason, first of all, that they've done it is because there's still a stigma about getting mental health care. And so just picture this, right? Single mother brings her son, we'll say it's a son, into the doctor's office, goes through all of the issues that the son's having, all of the challenges, and doctor says, hey, you know what? I really think your son should see somebody, right? They should see a therapist and talk through this. The mom says, my son's not crazy, right? Like, my son doesn't need to see anybody. And so what these groups have done is they have taken behavioral health therapists and psychologists, mental health therapists, and they have immersed them into the primary care office. So you've got your primary care physician or your NP sitting there, and it's like a connected experience. And so it takes off we're going to send out a referral, and now the patient has to follow up and do the referral, right? It just connects the two together. And that's where we've seen a ton of success in value-based care as well, because it's really looking at the healthcare experience, not just physical health, right? It's looking at it holistically. And a lot of times our mental health impacts our physical health, right? And so making sure that we're healthy and sharp in both angles, I think that's where we've seen the most success. I agree. It's been talked about for a long time. I think there's a lot of momentum now. We hope to see more, because at the end of the day, it really shouldn't just be a fee for service, right? Then if I'm a doctor, I'm going to be inclined to do every single service I can think of, regardless of whether it's needed. It really should be based on outcomes. And so it's just just like everything, it's an iterative process to try to get us to the point where that is really successful.
Couldn't have said it better. Well said. I really appreciate that answer. So where do we go next? We've talked about how far we've come, since your dad was working through his challenges, where we are today and some of the trends that we're seeing. If we were to look down the road, 5 years, what do you see on the horizon? Future innovations, partnership-wise, even more iterations on the value-based care model. Where do you see the healthcare industry going next?
Yeah, I think there's really great things in store for the industry as a whole. I think we're going to see, if we're impressed if we go back 10 years ago and the progress that's been made in 10 years, I think in the next 5, we're going to be doubly impressed on what happens. I think there's big things, the buzz right now is about artificial intelligence and machine learning and the impact that can have in healthcare. I think it can help with, personalized treatment plans with predictive analytics. It will enhance the decision-making process, improving patient outcomes, even things like we were just talking about with reimbursements and negotiations with payers. I think that AI is going to be a big part of the next 5 years. And there's so many use cases. It's really about narrowing the scope on what can we do right now, what's going to be most impactful right now. And the prioritization of those things has never been more important. Another one I think is we're going to see further incremental expansion of telehealth. So there's a lot of people who thought that, hey, like telehealth is a pandemic thing, it's going to kind of go away. At Advanced MD, our numbers have only grown in terms of telehealth usage. Obviously, a lot of that's related to behavioral health, but it's also related to, aging population and making sure that the right care is happening in that segment. And then the third thing I would mention is really, I think there will be an increased focus on user experience and design. And so when you think about products, it's, hey, how intuitive is this? How easy is this? When you think about mobile applications that will help with healthcare, if you download something onto your phone and you go into the app and it needs an instruction manual, you immediately delete the app because you think, oh my gosh, an app shouldn't need an instruction manual. It's just intuitive. It just works.
Right.
And so I think there will be an increased focus on that. Another thing, I guess the last thing I would mention is I'm also excited about, the integration in the Internet of Things and wearables and the way that can help. I even heard recently, there was a company, I don't remember which company, but that they were working on something that would go in your shoe, right? And that would help with like heart rate, and that would manage like not only like a pedometer, but heart rate and blood circulation and all of the things that it can connect. And then you think about having that. I'm kind of a data person myself. So you think about having that data library or that data warehouse of all of this information that can be connected and really help predict, oh my heavens, like this person, they have a family history of heart attack, and these are the conditions, and these are the historical conditions, and, they need to be checked, right? They need to go to a cardiologist. And having that kind of more proactive healthcare, I think that's what's in store for us, whether it's 5 years or 10, I guess we'll see. But I think it's an exciting time to be a part of healthcare.
I do too. And on your wearables point, when I was at HLTH, I ran across this individual who is working on you can call it a wearable, I guess, but it's dental.
Huh.
And it can be implanted in existing equipment. So think of like a bridge or, a fake tooth. It can be implanted in a place that is there already, right? You wouldn't feel it. But the benefit of it is constant data gathering, because you can learn a lot about somebody's health and the trajectory of that health based on the saliva.
Interesting.
And it was a part of an oral health panel. And I thought that was incredible. I talked to him afterwards, and they're already doing some of this in pets. So think of, your family dog or something like that, where they can't verbally tell you how they're feeling. And so you oftentimes don't know how they're doing until it's too late. And they're seeing some great success. The next step is, understanding the value and the benefit of having that data for each one of us. And so the wearables part of this is, we oftentimes just think of an Apple Watch or something that we can wrap around our ankle or a pedometer of some kind. But I'm excited, especially for, those that are doing activities, physical activities, on the wearables part of our industry and how much data we can get and what great insights we can draw from those kinds of technologies.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I hadn't heard about the dental one, and I would just want to say side benefit of that could be improved oral hygiene, because if you have something in your mouth, you're probably going to be more incentivized not to skip that flossing, right? It's like, I'm going to floss, I'm going for it. I know this is tracking. So I think it's incredible. And technology, it's so amazing what can be done. And it's just about getting the right people together and letting the ideas flow. And as Brene Brown said, really embracing vulnerability, right? Because if you have a workplace where people are not able to be vulnerable, you'll also have a workplace where they're not able to be creative or they're not able to innovate. And so I love that there's so many organizations out there that are really embracing the vulnerability, allowing people to innovate and create. And I think the entire population, right, of the world will be better because of those innovations.
I'd agree. All right. We've talked about so many things. If somebody listens to this podcast, what's the one thing that you want them walking away understanding? Before we let them go, they've got to understand and remember this one thing. What would you leave them with?
I think the one thing that I would really want people to think about or remember is that improvement is an iterative process. It's not going to happen overnight. And I think we collectively need to celebrate the wins and the accomplishments that we do have. It's easy sitting here today in, October of 2023 versus 10 years ago to see all of the different ways that we've improved. But during the time, at times, like it felt really slow and it felt like a big slodge and it was difficult. And I think not losing sight of the fact that progress in healthcare has been made, it will continue to be made, and really just taking time to celebrate those wins and being excited about it. Of course, we're all focused on the next big thing. We all want to get there. But the reality is, like, you never actually get there, right? The perfect BHAG is one that you can never accomplish, right? It's a big, hairy, audacious goal because it really can't be accomplished because it's always iterative and you're always trying to improve. And so I think giving ourselves space to recognize it's not always going to be perfect. We're not always going to be successful. Some of the ideas are going to fail, and that's okay. Just to keep trying and keep iterating and keep pushing forward. And that ultimately we will find a place where we can look back and say, yeah, we're better today than we were yesterday. And that's really exciting.
And what I appreciate about that answer and our conversation today is you've used the term we throughout. It's going to take a village. It's going to take all of us. And, the saying is innovate or die, evolve or die. But I think in healthcare, it's collaborate or die. We have to come together. We have to work together. Everybody has to do their part to get where we want to go because this problem's too big for one of us to solve. And you touched on government, you touched on legislation, the technology, innovators and disruptors. The patient has their own responsibility. The provider has theirs. It's going to take us all. It's going to take the entire village, and we're going to get there. And it's cool to look back and see how far we've already come.
I agree completely. And I look forward to future collaboration and better collaboration. And I think that we're on the right track, right? And it takes a lot of help. And like I said, sometimes it takes government pushing and mandates. But I think the understanding of the importance of it is there. And so, I look forward to even more buy-in from people and that collaborative experience. I agree with you. It does take a village.
Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great. I'm glad we were able to finally meet.
This was fun. You're welcome back anytime.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much, David.
Bye.
See ya.